I am on a journey into not knowing. And the more I don't know, the harder it is to sit here and say anything. And and I don't know what to say about any of this. It is not a bad thing not to know. I will tell you that, I think I've said this quite a bit recently, everything you do know on some level is not true. So knowing it provides only limited advantage. There certainly is a kind of advantage into day-to-day life. Things you know will help you. And not knowing isn't so much a help as it is a kind of new way of looking. Being taken by surprise pretty regularly by everything. Because pretty much all the things you took for granted and were certain of no longer appear certain. You watch people go about their daily lives, and it used to make sense on some level. Everything that people were doing every day. You know, it certainly makes sense in terms of providing for survival. We all keep providing for survival. We somehow keep the body going. We're very devoted to that. We're very devoted to the things around us that give us purpose, meaning, and pleasure. We certainly avoid things that give us discomfort and displeasure. And that's all sort of understandable. That's what we do. And you know, and human life seems so interesting and surprising and provocative and fascinating, and we're also caught up in our own limited sense of what I need to do, what the drama is for today. And we went to Home Depot yesterday to buy a barbecue, and I'm looking at all these people swarming around, and they're all so purposeful, so certain of it's Memorial Day weekend and we eat hamburgers. And they were serving free hot dogs, and it was like, I haven't ever had a free hot dog. And I thought, wow, so I had a hot dog. And the people were so nice, and I didn't know how we were going to get the barbecue in the car, but we did. They helped us take it apart and put it in, and everything flowed, and everything was like fine. And you know, I kept wondering about all these people and what they thought they were about, and what they thought their day really was, and what they thought they were doing and were going to do later. And I couldn't understand it. I mean, I understood it in terms of there's this universe out here that came into being for some reason billions of years ago, and I know it wasn't just to go buy barbecues at Home Depot. I just know it wasn't. On the other hand, it really was that. And so this mundane thing had such profound aspect. And then Josh and the kids came over yesterday, and Evan was here, and we were all around, and they decided to stay for dinner. So we used the barbecue, and I had one of the best hamburgers I ever had, and it was really unbelievable, and corn on the cob, and it was like, oh my God, this was so delicious. And I mean, there was such joy and simplicity and pleasure in an unfolding of a day that didn't seem particularly directed, and everybody in that day had their own agendas. Talia wanted to watch Cats again. Evan wanted to make sure the kids were getting enough sleep and getting enough exercise, and they were in the pool, and Josh had work to do and was feeling kind of removed, and that work was important. And I came upstairs, and I had this weird thing. I was trying to fix my computer screen so I could clear all the stuff on this, on the desktop. And I found a file that kind of said, I forget what it said, but something like important stuff. And it has pages and pages of stuff in it. And it all did seem important. It had ideas for movies from years ago and little pieces of information like the house my mother used to live in, her address in Detroit, that I never saw when I was, and she grew up in it and loved it. And I suddenly said, I can go on the internet and type that address in, and I could actually see the house my mother lived in when she was a little girl. And I don't know why I decided to do that, but suddenly there it was. There was her house, and an aerial view, and it was for sale, and that was taken off the market. And the house looked beautiful, and I was like, I'm in all these worlds. I'm just all these strange worlds. And then there was another little piece of something, of an article that was written in the New York Times when I was a kid that was about me and a couple of other people who started a film program in New York. And I tapped into it, and there was me, a picture of me in the New York Times, looking back at me sitting here in my chair, and all this thing of time and space was all convoluting, and it felt really meaningful and sweet, and the whole day was just moving towards some kind of richness that had nothing to do with the specificity of anything, or maybe it was the specificity of things, but it didn't have, it was without context. It just was. It just was. And that was really meaningful to me. And I felt so grateful just to be, and not to understand any of it, not to be able to put it into some kind of context. And then I got an email from someone who I know is suffering deeply in her life. And I thought, we live in the same world, but her drama, fears, tensions, suffering was so enormous. And I tried to think, well, what can I do to help? And I don't know that there's anything I can do to help other than be compassionate, which seemed important, to reach out and just say I'm there. And not to give prescriptions, because I hate prescriptions. People always tell me, we'll do this and everything will be fine. And here I am, kind of the meditating teacher, teaches you, I say things like, do this and do that, it will be fine. And I'm not persuaded of that. I don't know that it will be fine. It will be what it will be. And I think that the suffering that this person is going through seems something that I can't help. I try to say all the right things. I try to give advice in terms of, that there are prescriptions in life, like meditating and sitting still and being quiet and getting out of your mind and getting out of your sadness and getting out of your depression. And you can say this to people, but until someone is really ready to hear it, until someone is ready to take that on, your prescription is kind of a torment in a way. It may be helpful. It might be helpful to plant a seed of something that one can do, but I know this person, I've been planting seeds for 50 years or longer, and none of them has taken, just none of them really. And yet, I have to say, she has a life of the mind. She's intelligent. She sees herself in perspective. She understands how overwhelmed she is by the drama of her life and more of what I would call the environment of her life. And that to me became a really important idea this morning, the idea of the environment of our life. What environment do we live in, each one of us? Because each one of us lives in a very different environment. We're definitely here in the world, we're definitely affected by cloud cover or sunlight and changes in the environmental atmospheric pressures. All of that stuff hits us. We're probably affected by planetary alignment. That makes sense to me that we are. But each one of us in our own way, and each one of us with our own sense of comfort or discomfort, and it probably alternating in many different ways and in moments, so that at one moment you're in just perfect alignment and things feel great, and the next moment you're kind of acidic and unhappy and melancholic and all of these things that kind of hit you, and then the clouds part and you're kind of sunny again, and then you watch the news and you're miserable again, and there's your environment is in constant motion, just like the environment outside. And so I kept trying to think of what can we do? What can we do when we're so impacted by environment, we're so impacted by our changeability, by our inability to stay in a constant state, which we all seem to think we would like, but as far as I can tell, constancy doesn't feel any better than inconstancy in the end. So the word that arose for me today out of nowhere, and that I thought I should share with you, although I don't know anything about it except that it arose, is neutralize. And that seemed somehow really potent. I don't know why it's potent, but neutralizing means taking whatever is there and engaging it in such a way that its aspect and capability of its capacity to disturb is lessened. Something happens if you take consciousness, which is the neutralizing factor, or attention, or relaxed energy, presence, and you bring it into the mix of whatever your environmental situation is, distress or not. Usually you don't want to do this if you're in a good state, but if you're in a state of disharmony on some level, you bring your attention, and rather than try to do anything, you just let it enter into the equation of your environmental state. You just bring it in. In other words, you just sit with it. You come into conscious presence with what you discover inside and just sit there. And it's really interesting what happens. There is a chemical alteration. The fact that you're in kind of edgy relationship to yourself, or you're feeling kind of down, or you're feeling kind of too cerebral or too nervous or worried, you just sit there and you don't run from it. You just come into its state, be there, and watch. And the watching energy, the presence of that conscious energy, takes whatever is going on and it goes, it basically just accepts it. It just accepts it. And what happens when you just accept what's happening is you neutralize it. It's no longer creating an affect. It's no longer creating a tension. It's no longer creating an unhappiness. It's no longer a state of agitation. It's just, oh. It's really simple. It doesn't take anything other than saying yes. Even this. That's a big old yogic practice. Even this. It's really powerful. And the word neutralize I like because it's a word you can just call up at any time and just go neutralize. Neutralize this. And what does that mean? Just sit still, go okay to this. Okay. And then this edgy, uncomfortable, environmental thing that you're going through will just go okay. It's a little bit, a good image is singing in the rain. Storm clouds gathering and the rain is pouring and we're all getting our umbrellas and hiding inside and not wanting to go out and we're kind of miserable. And Gene Kelly goes out and starts tap dancing, you know. And that tap dancing becomes one of the most joyous scenes in movies today because he's taking this environmental thing that all of us react to in sort of the same way and he's just going, I'm singing in the rain. And that's a neutralizing of something and turning it into something, not that it's positive, you don't have to go that far, but you can also just go, I'm in the rain. And we were in Seattle last year, living in Seattle, and one of the things we discovered in Seattle, and you see it in Vancouver and other wet places, people don't carry umbrellas, and they don't wear raincoats. It's the most amazing thing. It's raining, and they're just walking in the rain. And I don't think they think about it. It's just, it rains so often. It's such a part of their life. They don't have to, unless it's really storming, get upset about it. They just get wet. And they walk through their day. It's a kind of way of neutralizing what would be for many of us a kind of, oh my God, it's always raining in my life. Why is it always raining? Why is it so miserable? And people do that. They take one little bit of rain and they extrapolate it into a constant part of their entire environment, and it justifies all of their misery. And you can do that. It's fine. If you want to live that life, you can do it. But you can also neutralize it. In other words, show up, look it in the face, and just go, it's okay. It's okay. Rain's okay. Sadness is okay. Depression, to a degree, is okay. I mean, everything is kind of okay in middle ground. If you are suffering extremity of that, if you are in severe depression, if you are in severe elation, let's call it that, because I know people who live that way as well, then you have to go into the help mode that exists in the world. And that comes out of one really important element. And Rudy talked about it all the time. It's called asking for help. It's so simple. You can't neutralize by yourself. You're trying. I mean, look, probably in the end, most of us could neutralize a pretty large degree of the discomfort that we're in. But there are places that in the psyche are really hard to access. And if you can't do it on your own, ask for help. There are so many amazing helpers out there. So many people. You know, it can be from just asking for a hug, which some people can't even do that, to saying, I need therapeutic, psychiatric, whatever it is help. I need medical help. And then find that help. The danger in that, and I'm not making a danger like a negative, but the danger is suddenly relying on the external to take care of you. Not that you shouldn't at certain times. At certain times we need help. But many of the times we can do it all by ourselves. We just don't know it, or we're lazy, or we haven't learned that we can do it by ourselves. But learning to do it by yourself is ultimately akin to meditation. It's sitting still and facing the thing that you are in, the environment that you are in. And it's really simple. You just do that. And you face it. And it's amazing what starts to happen. Wow. Feels good. You didn't do anything except accept it. You just allowed it to be. You stopped being the obstinate force that's creating the tension, that creates the environment of hostility and rejection. You just let go of that. And then when you let go of that, there's no hostility and there's no rejection. There's just being. And then the day has its amazing aspect. You know, the guys at the Home Depot load this thing into your car. You know, Blanche, and you find you're capable of taking it out of the car and putting the screws in, even though we got angry because we couldn't quite align it. But we did align it. And we did it all by ourselves. And it wheeled right into the backyard, and everything was, I'm telling you, everything kind of works out when you neutralize. It just kind of flows. Life has a way of flowing. It flows like this, or it can flow like that. You know, that's a kind of flow. It's, you know, you watch a river. It does all of this stuff. It's flowing. You don't want to necessarily be in the middle of that particular flow, but it's flowing. But you can get it so that there is nothing in you that's a rock against the flow. You are just part of it. And then the dynamic of it becomes, let's just call it bearable, or acceptable, or even good, even fun, sweet. And you can live like that. You really have the capacity to live like that. If you can't find the answer, ask for help. If help comes, say thank you. If the help comes in the form of a pill, use it as long as you need to, and then try not to go back to pills. Try to find that once you get into a kind of middle zone, to take charge of your life. Be responsible for your condition. And, you know, I can say that to so many people, and some people, it's possible to become responsible, and for some people, it's really hard. Some people's lives are really, really difficult, and we should not judge their lives because we don't know what it's like to be someone else. We just don't. So what you can do for people who you know who are really struggling and for whom it is hard is show up as a compassionate presence. Don't tell them what to do, although you can tell them there's probably help out there. You can hug them, which really will be help. You can sit with them and be with them, which is very positive thing to do. Or you can just say, I get it. I really get it. And I'm so sorry you're having such a hard time. I'm really sorry. It's kind of, that's it. You know, that's how we can get through life. And, you know, the hard news, the really hard news is it's up to you. That's the hard news. It's finally, in the end, up to you. And, you know, you have to align with yourself. You have to align with your inner, whatever you want to call it, neutralizing capacity. You have to do that work. Nobody can really do it for you. People can point you in that direction. They can help you along the way. In the end, it's up to you. The whole thing is up to you. Even trying to make sense of the universe. You can listen to people like me, or you can read the great teachers, you know. You can listen to all of what they have to tell you. You can believe anything you want to believe. I'm telling you, in the end, none of it will hold up. None of it will hold up. It's completely your exploration of truth. It's for you to figure out. You can buy into what anybody tells you if you want, if that helps you, if it feels good, but in the end, don't trust any of it. Just trust your not knowing. Trust not knowing. And it's really interesting what occurs by not knowing. And I know that means something different to everybody who's hearing it, but in the deepest, most profound sense, it's truly a mystery. It's truly a mystery. And once you acknowledge that and walk around in it, you will be, I guess, amazed by it. At least that's my experience. You won't walk into Home Depot the same way. That's all I can tell you. You won't see it as just people buying stuff for the weekend. Something massive is going on, and we're all part of it. So, neutralize. Any questions?
I feel there's a paradox inside about the fact that I experience, because I have a body. Like, there's a body, this is me, I'm experiencing it, I see through it, and yet I don't really feel like I am my body. There's a way that I'm not my body. And yet it's how we...
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean...
Speak to that a little.
Well, it's kind of what I said last week, both and, neither or, either but, you know, all of the above, none of the above. I mean, it's all true and not true. I mean, that's all I can say. We're a body and not a body. We're a self and there is no self. We are everything there is and there's nothing. You know, you can't, what I'm saying is you can't put any of that together. It's impossible. But, in this very moment in time, there's a Shelley and there appears to be a Bruce. We're sitting in a room. There appears to be a place that we gave a name, you know, Marin County, and it's very pretty right now. And there's sort of something we know experientially. We kind of don't know anything else, really. We think we have a history, but if our mind's not going back into our history, it's not really activated. So all we kind of know is this imprint. And if you were home by yourself right now, it would be elongating, kind of be stretching out a little bit. Maybe you'd be sitting around. Maybe your mind would be fulminating about the present tense, and maybe looking backward and looking forward, and maybe worrying and maybe not worrying. But whatever that is, there would be this kind of movement. But right now we're kind of right here in this space. That's all we know. That's all we know, and we don't even really know it. But that's all we got. So what do we do with it? What do we do with it? You know, that's a good question. You can either go yes to it, or you can get psychological and theological and philosophical and try to figure it out. But you can't even really do that right now because we're having a dialogue. Your mind doesn't have time to go there right now. So you're sitting on a pillow. You look very comfortable. You actually look very happy. You look very quiet. That's what is. That's what it is. Will it be that in 5 minutes? Absolutely not. Be completely different. You have to stand up, change the equation, change the dimensions of your existence, move down those stairs into the kitchen, put food in your body. That's going to be an entirely different universe. Entirely different. And totally real. And yet absolutely illusionary. So, what do we do with that? I can't figure it out anymore. And that's why it's hard to prescribe things, because all I can say is, well, here we are, here I am. I assume here you are. It feels like you're there. And we're going to share this moment together, then we're going to separate, and we're going to come back together, and then we may not come back together and go off and share with other people, and then that may continue or not. And somehow we kind of know at some point this will all go away. And then what? And we don't know that. We don't know. So not knowing is kind of true. It's kind of true. It's just there's something real about not knowing and just being. And interestingly, you're hearing from me today that just being somehow allows things to be, to flow. and when they don't flow well, you have an ability to be present with whatever's happening, and you can neutralize the discomfort of it on some level until you can't. So there's certain strategies for how to get through the next moment, and that's kind of the extent of our knowledge. You know, you can bring to the equation, you know, the history of all the people who've written about life and all the narratives and all the documentation of what history has been. I mean, I assume it's true on some level. On another level, probably not. And I remember very vividly in the LSD moments of years ago that when I started to die, the whole universe died. It was all my own creation. I remember going, I was Shakespeare. I had created Shakespeare. I'd created everything. It was all mine. I don't know if Bruce's was the right way to describe it, because Bruce was like gone in a flash, but it was mine, whatever I was, and then that was gone. So it's so not tangible, it's so not graspable, and yet it has this wonderful concretized physical manifestation. So here we are. Enjoy it or don't enjoy it. Live it well or don't live it well. Kind of your choice. But you have enormous choice in that. Enormous choice, not in the minute-to-minute arrival of what's going to happen, but in how you interact with its happening. And the technique, which I'm talking about today, of neutralizing your reaction, let's say, makes it a little bit easier to go through. And that's about all I can tell you. Okay. Anybody else? Blanche.
I've always had a hard time with the word surrender. To me, surrender means like giving up. And so I always substituted the word acceptance. And that's worked for me for a long time, years really. And today, for the first time, I had the sense that acceptance is, it works, but there's still something there. And that surrender has to come after acceptance. And I was just so grateful to understand that. And you know, I've always thought, well, this is all just semantics, but it's really not. It's really a process that we need to go through, I think.
I agree. I mean, I've gone through the same journey with that, acceptance and surrender, and one of the things I've understood in recent time is there comes a moment where you can't accept it, and you just have to surrender. You accept it as long as you can, and at some point you go, basically I can't do this. I can't do it. And you surrender to what? Well, that's a really interesting thing. You know, it's hard to surrender to an enemy, although sometimes you have to. You know, cancer, let's say, you know, or invading tribe of somebody. But surrender in the abstract is giving yourself over to something, or some no thing, but it's something in us kind of knows that when you surrender, something, and I hate to say the word thing, but something is there to make it okay, to kind of take you in. I don't know, that's vaguely an act of faith and trust, and I think faith and trust are really important ingredients in all of this, but the only thing I can say is, when you need to surrender and you finally do surrender, I believe and have faith that which you're surrendering to will embrace you. May not be true. We won't, I don't know. But it feels like it's so built into the construct that if we need to at some point get there. And I think most people in the moment where they have no choice kind of embrace that. Maybe. But I do think there's a big difference between acceptance and surrender, and I think what you're explaining is really the journey. And surrender comes much later and goes much more deeply than acceptance.
And I think surrender is not only giving up, but it's also giving in.
Yes. Yeah.
I missed the last part.
Surrender is not only giving up, but it is also giving in.
Yeah, and it has all different kind of connotations. I mean, I love the word surrender because it's not a simple word, and because when Rudy gave it to us, he said, "Ask for help to surrender," which was his key injunction in spiritual terms. I thought the word help was really important, and the word surrender is really important, and I've had to deal with both of those words now for however many 40-some years I've been sitting like this, almost 50 years, I think. So, it's not like you just go, "Oh, I have to surrender." It's like, what is this? And really the extraordinary journey that we're all on, in a way, is an exploration of what that means. What does it really mean? And in time, I don't know that we get it exactly, but I think in the end we do it.
For me, it's surrendering my will. That I don't really have, I'm always trying to control or fix or do or whatever, and just going, you know what? It's not mine to control, fix, or do.
Right.
I have to give that up.
It's a wonderful thing that happens in spiritual practice and in many other practices, the idea of thy will. Whatever thy is. And we don't know. You can't know what thy is. And for me, there was always, in the unfolding of my spiritual life, a sense that thy was something. The self, God, transcendent truth, whatever it is, it was conceptualized in some way. And finally what's happened for me is I have understood that I can't understand. That thy, that God, that the transcendent is beyond any conception at all. That it is the unknowable unknown, which I've talked about now for months, because it helps me to know that the grasping of it is a false security. It's better to not grasp. It's better to not know. It's better to walk around in what I call mystery than to walk around in some vague certainty that there is something there that cares, that knows, that gives meaning, all of that stuff. I absolutely no longer feel that I know that to be true. I know whatever is not something my brain will ever process. So, that for me is an extraordinary thing. But I do know that I am. Interestingly, I know that I am. And I think we all do. That's the one thing we kind of know. We don't know what we are or what I am means, but we know I am. And that, that's a big part of certain religious teachings. Nisargadatta's book is called I Am That. But he walks around and says, if you want to figure out who you are, just say to yourself, I am. I am. I am. Get to the core of what I am means. I don't know that you get to the core of anything, but except the erasing, finally, of everything that isn't, which is pretty fascinating. Any other questions? Okie doke. Next week I'm in LA, so there will not be a class. the week after, we will be here, same time, same station. Okay, thanks, guys.